so you put that in your pockets, it's the easiest.
Yeah.
Right, thank you. Okay.
Are we on? Yes.
We are on, yeah.
Excellent.
I'll come over here. Right, well, welcome everybody. There's one seat left for, actually it's for Wilfred, right. So we must get one for David as well. If David could join you, Mark, would that be all right? If we just used, Peter, you couldn't just bring one of those chairs, could you, from there for David? Right, so here we are on a lovely Sunday afternoon for Cafe Church. Thank you for coming, and particularly thanks to Stuart, who's got to get down to Oxford after this, but is with us now. So maybe two more chairs. Our Kathy's come to. I said to Stuart this morning, how shall I introduce you? And he said, International Man of Mystery. So I understood things like international, because I know he is, and I know the IT, and I know the mysterious world that he's in somewhere, but I don't know anything about it. And I don't actually know how you would describe yourself. Just describe your role, your job, then, Stuart. Wendy, could you turn it up a bit? Thank you. Okay.
So the cover-all for my sins is consultant, because that tells you absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Because I visit certain countries sometimes with my work, most recently Ukraine and Georgia, and I almost visited Armenia. Very quickly people think I must be a spy, which I'm not, but then I would say that, wouldn't I? So really what I do is something very dull to do with the plumbing of how companies work. So companies have to report, just like banks and insurance. They have more reporting to do, their annual accounts each year. And most of us think of that as a big document that you thumb through. And I'm one of the few people who thinks it shouldn't be a big document you thumb through. It should be something the machines can read. So I spend quite a lot of effort with all sorts of regulators behind the scenes and auditors and things, making sure there's little digital stickers on all those numbers so that the machines can read them reliably. They don't guess what your profit is or your assets. They know exactly. And every country has their own particular set of ways of doing that. Every country has their own unique problems with that in terms of how companies try to present themselves in the right way, which is sometimes about them struggling to be honest, and other times it's simply human error. But you can help with both by shining a spotlight on it. So most of my life is shining a spotlight on these things and then letting other people go and do clever things with the data. So that still tells you absolutely nothing, but there you are. It's better.
That's the one-line answer to my question. Thank you. But Stuart was obviously in high demand for this rather specialist job. So excellent man to do AI opportunities and dangers. And Stuart, over to you for about half an hour of input and so on, and then opportunity for discussion and questions and so on. And then we just have a very short compliment at the end. But Stuart, thanks so much.
Thank you, John.
Over to you.
Thank you all for coming. It's quite humbling, actually. I am someone who knows more about AI than some people, some family members, but definitely less than quite a lot of other people who are running big AI companies. So that's the context, if you like. There are slides. I will try to not make it death by PowerPoint, but I think it's easier to see things sometimes. So how many of us have used AI today without even realizing it? If you need to shuffle, feel free to shuffle. Predictive text, WhatsApp tells you what to fill in. Alexa, Spotify, Netflix recommending things. You might have asked a chatbot something, you might have asked Google something, but then it gave you an answer rather than a page hit. So that was all AI happening, and there's probably an even more mundane example coming up a bit later. One of my favourite cartoons on AI is this one. So there's two different offices on the screen. The first one, we've got Fred there, who's only got a single bullet point, so he asks AI to turn it into a really large email to send over to Wilma. And Wilma on the right doesn't have time to read this really long email, so she asks AI to turn it back into a single bullet point for her. So they've kind of missed the point. And as well as that example, which is on the left, one I came across working with civil servants in my very strange job. In the UK, they have a style guide for how to write job adverts, and it's, great words like synergies all over it and things. So they write their job adverts in human, internally, and before AI, they would then spend about 3 person days writing it out in approved civil servant speak and about 2 weeks of approvals, and eventually get the job out there, at which point probably no one understood what it was referring to anyway. But that's nonetheless how it even is today. Their great innovation was to use AI, so they fed it all the old human descriptions and all the published jobs, and now they have an AI that in 1 minute can turn a human-readable, understandable job description into a very strange civil servant speak. Again, it's a great use of AI in some ways. It's freed up those people to do other tasks, but it's sort of missed the point at the same time, which is why you're writing something that you all agree is incomprehensible. So what is AI really? Well, I'll talk a bit about what it used to be, but what most of us mean when we say AI at the moment is these things called large language models, or LLMs. It sort of looks like llama when you sometimes see it on screen, which is really sophisticated pattern matching. So it's not understanding. So it's trained on a huge amount of text. So you can imagine it trained on all the works of Shakespeare and all the essays ever written on it and all the grades of them, and that would probably give it a really good way to go and try and come up with the next work of not Shakespeare. But it is just predictive text, like we're used to from text messages, taken to a really logical extreme. And it's roughly, that is a good way of thinking how ChatGPT and things work, but they are a lot bigger. So we talked about opportunities. Well, health. Peter, as he was coming in, did give me something which is worried about, quite rightly. What do we do when AI kills the first patient? Obviously, humans have been doing that for a while, but, still a practical problem there. You've now got something else to blame. But there are opportunities there, not dangers. So spotting things earlier in scans than a human eye can, very good example. Lots of acceleration of drug discovery. If we switch to a different thing, and partly what I was doing for Armenia, anyone who's been on holiday recently and used a smartphone will have seen Google Translate, hopefully. If you haven't, then definitely do. And you can be going on a tour, and you are in France, and they only have the French tour, and you press Translate, and if you've got earbuds in, it'll start live translating the French person speaking into English, or putting the text up on your screen in English as they're saying it. And when I was doing work over there in Armenia, there was this pile of laws, lots of which had an official English translation, but the more recent ones, which I guess was a sign that they were feeling more confident, they weren't bothering to publish an English translation of anymore. But you can just copy-paste the whole thing into Google and get back an English translation. And I used to be really nervous about that. But then a few times, it used to happen quite a lot when I was working with Ukraine. I'd go, well, this is what Google Translate's done, don't shoot me. And they go, no, that's fine, that's right. And one of the reasons is it's not just some kind of mechanical device translating. It learns every time it translates, and people say, that isn't very good, and correct it. And so the AI there is processing it and learning it. Lots of stuff in work. We saw those emails and bullet points before, but there's lots of admin and drudgery. So freeing up times for things that actually need a person, judgment, creativity, care. So for some of my clients, I have to fill in timesheets. They're not Excel spreadsheets. They're these hideous web forms you fill in saying I worked so many hours on a certain day on a certain project. And then they want a report of all the exciting things done. And being able to just copy-paste that all into the AI chat and say, make me some really nice paragraphs that say I've worked really hard for the last month. That's really useful, because I used to agonize over that and waste a lot of time that I wasn't being paid for trying to say what I'd done, whereas now something else can make it up. You can ask it anything, things to do in Paris. It'll give you a list. Not because it knows, because it's read all the articles about what to do in Paris. Give me a recipe to wow my friends. There's been a few adverts about this recently, and you tell it what's in your fridge. But again, it's got a list of every recipe ever made. It's not inventing recipes, it's just knows that someone blogged about their favorite pasta and broccoli recipe or whatever it is. But you can also do fun things. So, yeah, here's my 500 proposals for this grant money, and maybe you're someone who doesn't want the most spiritual, or do you want the most wacky? You know, you can ask all sorts of odd questions, and a human would go, well, crumbs, I've just laboriously gone through all these and scored them in the way you first said. I've got to do that all again. So that will take another 2 days, whereas the AI just plows through it, and about 10 minutes later it goes, well, here's the information you asked for. So any of that large processing of lots of stuff, it's really good at. So kind of want to pause, but I won't turn it into a discussion now, but where have you already found it useful? We'll come back to this a bit. So now let's talk about dangers, my fun bit, and where better to start than a nice picture from Facebook of our wardens and Martin and Lorna on a trip to Ripon Cathedral to be re-wardened, I think. Well, look what they did in the cathedral. Who knew there was an improv karaoke band? Can we see how AI has drawn some of them well and others less so? Martin looks slightly like Justin Welby. David doesn't really look like David at all. Lorna's pretty good. Peter's pretty good. How did I even do that? I said, create an additional image of all those with red circles. I just put red circles over the original photo. That was the only thing I told it to do, and it came up with that. So how about a summer night out for Martin? This was a photo I took of Martin last summer. He's put Wilfred's bucket hat on, not the one he's wearing today, a different one. And I naughtily took a photo of him. And as we know, Martin has occasionally got into trouble for daring to dress down in jeans. Well, just think how upset people would be if they realized who he hung out with last summer. Here he is, having a pint with Liam and Noel Gallagher from Oasis, on stage with them at one of their big concerts. And all I asked was, this is Martin. He's wearing a bucket hat. Maybe you could draw a picture of him with Oasis, or alternately having a pint with them. That's what they did. But enough of silly things. You can do proper research. I had cause to do some serious research. I don't know whether you've all noticed, but Bishop John has quite a dislike of Donald Trump. And I have worked out, I think, where the issue might have begun. About 20 years ago, when John was Bishop of Oxford, it looks like there was a private event at the Randolph Hotel, a lovely hotel in the centre of Oxford. And I think there were key members of the establishment there, because I found a photo of 3 quite well-known, interesting people having afternoon tea together. They all look a bit younger, even the Donald. Of course, things did not stay that way, did it? Things did not stay civil. Donald lost his mind, threw custard everywhere, and I think we know where Bishop John's dislike of Donald Trump started as a result. Yes, those were all what are known as deep fakes. But some looked more fake than others, right? And that's the reassuring part for now. If you look closely, there are usually tells. A slightly wrong hand, a shadow that doesn't quite match. I didn't think Martin's face looked correct in either of the Oasis ones, but he had the right robe on, so it must be him, right? But when the gap is closing really fast, and it won't be long before it closes completely, and when that gap between what it's attempting and what is real does close, it won't just be Bishop John covered in custard for a laugh. It'll be a politician saying something they never said 3 days before an election, and none of us will be able to tell just by looking. So another exciting theme about the dangers, will there even be a job for us to do? Many people will be worried about not necessarily jobs for themselves, but for our children or grandchildren. Will there be a job left for them at all? It's not just white-collar jobs. Robots are getting smaller, cheaper, and genuinely more capable. So blue-collar and manual jobs will be affected too. But affected doesn't have to mean gone. Often it means transformed. Less of the tedious, repeatable part of a job, more of the part that actually needs a human being: judgment, care, skill, contact with another person. So the bullet points about the email into three, back into a bullet point to an email and back again to 3 bullets, arguably that's exactly the kind of thing that should disappear, recycling information without adding any value to it. Whereas a job that's the exact opposite, actually creating value, not just repackaging it, is a lot more durable. Now, this is obviously a very disputed territory. Some people think it's going to be really different this time. It's a huge speed and breadth of what's changing. And even in the best case version of what AI does to jobs, the transition is going to be really painful for certain individuals and whole communities. It's not some sort of abstract, long-run adjustment. And who gets judged? If people haven't seen it, it's quite well known now. Amazon thought it'd be a really good idea to use AI to vet their CVs. And so they plugged in 10 years of hiring data. These are the people we hired. These are the people we didn't hire, so that's clear. But also, of the people we hired, these are the ones who turned out to be super good, and these were the ones that were so-so. And the AI amazingly learned that any resume with, or CV as we'd call it, with women as a word somewhere. So if you'd participated in the women's chess club, or you'd gone to an all-women's college, you were voted down. You were clearly a bad CV. Why was that? Because their hiring was dominated by men. So it just told them exactly what they'd told it. They'd asked it. They said, look, we want you to go and find people like this. So it went and found people like that. So Amazon scrapped it, which was good. The financial industry, both for individuals and companies, uses all sorts of AI with completely opaque criteria based on historical lending patterns to work out who's good and who's bad, who's hired, who gets a loan. The same pattern shows up. But the algorithm isn't inventing unfairness, it learns it from us. Then it applies it faster, at scale, and with a totally false sense of objectivity. Now, washing machine or power station. So we do have AI in washing machines. We actually have had it for a long time. And it might optimize a cycle to get clothes cleaner, but it could misjudge something and run too hot and start a fire and burn down someone's house, which would be very bad for that person. But if you take the same approach to a nuclear power station, the stakes scale accordingly. It could genuinely help. Spotting and flagging a fault a tired or distracted human might miss. But if something went wrong with the AI itself, or there was a malicious actor involved, the AI could cause or worsen exactly the kind of accident it was meant to prevent. So the technology isn't changing between those examples. What changes is what we plug AI into and how much oversight we keep over that connection. the amount of energy. So here's some maths for Wilfred. 1,006 plus 4,314, even my tired brain can do it, 5,320. It's all right, I wasn't really going to pick on you. But you can use a pocket calculator, and it uses effectively zero energy. You know, it's got 2 batteries in it, and it lasts 5 years. So the cost of an individual sum is as close to zero as you can get. Ask an AI the same sum, depending on the AI, and you might be using enough energy to charge a phone for a day. Now, these numbers are completely changing all the time. Yes, it will all get more efficient, but yes, we'll ask it to do more complex things. I've no idea how much energy it took to make those photos I showed you. They were all generated for free, but someone somewhere's paying. But you know, even the trivial has a real cost behind it. Who's in charge? Very few people in government or industry deeply understand how these systems actually work. At Sellafield in Cumbria, which started off as Windscale, the sort of military creation of nuclear fuel, and then became Calder Hall, which was started off military and then became civilian. But at Windscale, there was a massive fire, which was sort of underreported at the time, but is widely acknowledged now as a pretty severe event. But that fire forced serious safety regulation into existence and shaped how the civilian industry that followed was overseen. And there are still accidents. So I'm not suggesting nuclear power governance is an example of the perfect, but I think it's going to take time with AI. I don't think we're going to be able to, or should want to stop it altogether. You know, no one wants to go back to horses and carts when you've got lorries, but I think it will take a visible, painful incident or 2 or 3 before the public, and indeed the politicians, demand that oversight and transparency that arguably should exist already. So something that's come up more than once in those examples is this idea of the same pattern and different disguises. A short message inflated into an email and deflated back into bullet points. The same bias showing up, whether it decides who gets hired or who gets a loan. The same AI behaving completely differently depending on whether it's connected to a washing machine or a nuclear power station. But it's the same pattern. The technology doesn't change. What changes is the scale we apply it at and how much attention we're paying to it. So, again, something to kind of sit with. Where have you felt a bit uneasy about it for you or society? So we've kind of been talking about current AI, these LLMs, but what came before it? Well, the most obvious one is fuzzy logic, which was decades before chatbots. And it lets machines handle in-between states, so mostly computers and calculators like ones and zeros, trues and false, on and off, like a light switch. But when you're doing a washing machine, you want things like fairly warm or a bit dirty. So in the 80s and 90s, washing machines adjusted their own cycles. So anyone who's used a washing machine that's adjusted its own cycle length has been using AI. But these days, of course, we connect washing machines to the internet and let all sorts of things go on in them, so that's fine. A bit later, we got this thing called machine learning, which people still talk about. So the best illustration of machine learning is identifying pictures of cats. So the computer was fed video frame after video frame of which may or may not have had cats in. It still doesn't know what a cat is, but it can identify every frame of video that does have a cat in because it just looks at certain clusters of colors and things like that. And that's the thing the machine doesn't understand. It's the same idea of pattern matching, but it's applied to images instead of language. So what are these things we've really been talking about? Chatbots, large language models. They write all sorts of software code now as well, because that's just a language. So it's read an enormous amount of text and it's learnt to predict, word by word, the most likely thing to say next. It's quite good if you want an example of it, if you try and make it write a prayer, because the churches have not methodically said next to where they've published a prayer what sort of church they are. So it just sort of makes an amalgamation of spiritual gloop, usually, when it tries to write a prayer, because it doesn't really know who it's writing it for. Whereas programmers know they're writing in a particular programming language, so it's much more disciplined, and it gets that much more right. So you'll find these little pockets where it's hopeless. So this is what powers most of what we currently think of as AI. Chatbots, coding assistants, they're all built on the same idea, pattern matching, predicting what comes next. If it's 99% sure that's what comes next, and the 1% answer has to come up 1% of the time, that's how probabilities work. So if it's getting it right 80% of the time, it's getting it wrong 20% of the time. Where's it heading? Well, this is sort of where science fiction and all those people spending billions on AI are heading to, this very exciting concept of general AI. So not just narrow tasks like languages or images, a system that can do anything a human mind can do. So HAL from 2001: A Space Odyssey, obviously that went a bit wrong, but you know. But it is strange, isn't it, to think about, does it have consciousness, sentience? Does such a thing even be said to want something? Nobody knows if or when this happens. It's speculation. But if serious people are asking whether a machine could one day do anything a human can do, well, that's kind of the point to ask, what could a machine never replace? So what is actually irreplaceable about being a human being? And I'm not going to claim I have the answer to that. I think it's quite a deep question. But that is the real question. It isn't whether AI is good or bad, it's a mirror. What should never be handled by a machine, though? Not because it can't technically do it, but because something would be lost. Compassion, conscience, discernment from actual experience, not data. That's the question. The kind of, why aren't the politicians thinking about that? So there's some takeaways. It's already everywhere. You've been using it since the 1980s. It's genuinely useful. It's sometimes uncanny. It may kill patients. It may save patients. It doesn't understand. It predicts. That's its power and its limit. The general AI idea may understand one day, but all you're looking at now is just very sophisticated prediction, very impressive prediction. The opportunity or danger, the kind of theme of the talk, well, what's it connected to? Who's in control? Who's watching it? Who shouldn't be connected to it but is? And real people bear the costs when it gets bias, jobs, or judgment wrong. That Amazon example is well known with their hiring model. There will be lots of others that aren't well known, either because the company hasn't realized or it has realized and it's deeply embarrassed about it. But yes, what's still irreplaceable about being a human? That is my question. So, thank you.
Gosh, that raises an awful lot of questions. Thank you very much, and a very clear presentation too. I like the white light right in the middle, but that was annoying. Thank you for the illustrations from, yes. Let's just see where we go with questions and comments. I mean, you raised a lot of questions, and you had 3 particular questions, of course, you put up, which we could spend time looking at. But while we're thinking of what we might ask, let me just throw in one to begin with. A question of who controls it. I mean, governments are not taking control together. The control seems to lie with a very few people at the top of just a few highly technical institutions. And these leaders, the tech bros, are being led by the financial motive. What would be your approach to just trying to deal with the dangers inherent in that?
Yeah. The tech bros, those in Silicon Valley in California and Texas, there's a few in Europe, not many. Mostly we mean those in the US with that phrase, are the ones in the sunlight. There are huge AI models being built everywhere. The ones that are probably most publicly known are in China, because when they occasionally publish something that's staggeringly effective but staggeringly cheaper than the tech bros. So you kind of think, well, we could try and regulate them and say no more AI or only AI according to this, but all that means is the AI would be created somewhere else. The internet is everywhere. That's the inter bit. So unless you're planning on sort of chopping the world off into silos, I kind of feel like the genie's out there, but so it's more like, how do you incentivize the right behavior? How do you get the wrong people to do the right thing? So what are the gates? How do you get citizens to stop being very excited that this thing's free? If it's free, your data is what's paying for it. It's not actually free, but we all go, great, it's free. Gmail's free. Why is Gmail free? Because they want to know what adverts to send to you, So the longer we all just go, oh, it's great, it's free, the more they just want our eyeballs in front of their machine engaging with them. So I think a more discerning customer, if you don't like the product, you don't go to the shop. Whereas at the moment, we don't know we don't like the product. So I think it's easier to tackle us as the people consuming it than trying to corral the modern day railroad tycoons into behaving themselves. Because it's not a railway you can point at anymore and go, it's that thing there in front of me. You can't build it anymore because it's sort of in the air. So there you are.
Yeah, thank you. Now, others will have lots of questions, so where would we like to go? Anybody? Wilfred's probably going to ask a question, but I'll leave his for later. Let's ask others.
I've got a small story.
Jennifer, can you use that?
My son is a scientist, and he's written many papers about chemistry. About a few years ago, perhaps 5 or 6 years ago, curiosity led him to Google himself, to AI himself. And the initial responses he got were accurate. It was Dr. Williamson at these degrees, etc., and he'd written these papers, which were true. But he then tried to follow through, and papers with his name on and the teams on were invented. They had never been written, they never existed, but they began then to be copied into other academic fields. So the AI had invented it. And how do we protect against that, I wonder? It's been very useful, though, because he was able to warn all my grandchildren that they just don't go with it because it tells lies. Or maybe it doesn't tell lies because it hasn't got that moral attitude, but it makes things up.
It does make things up. It sometimes politely refers to that as hallucinating. It gets more and more, at the risk of displaying my own prejudice, it gets more and more like a public school, an Eton person. It tends to have a very plummy voice and speak with authority. But like a lot of public school bluffers, they carry on speaking with authority about a subject they know little. You can think of certain politicians, but you have to know. And when you know, you think, well, why is it going like that? And yeah, when you see a list of papers or something, you think, why would it be making that up? Like, I've not asked it for a judgment on why it was dark yesterday, or darker than I was expecting, and you might think it sort of guessed a bit, as a human might, trying to frantically come up with an answer. But yeah, when you just say, I just want a list of my things, it makes them up. I've had it. It can be quite dangerous professionally if you're using AI. As you'll go, oh, this is great, it'll save me time. I need a list of acronyms at the front of my document. And they all look at first glance fine. And then you find there's 2 or 3 buried that are complete nonsense. And then you ask it about them. And it goes, oh yeah, I made that one up. I don't know why I did that. And you think, but you're a robot. Like, you didn't actually make it up. What's happening behind the scenes is that its pattern matching went wrong. This is what I mean by it gets it right 80% of the time. That means 20% of the time it has to get the wrong answer, or 3%, whatever the percentage is. It's all a probability-based system. So if, 19 out of those 20 papers exist, it's entirely reasonable for the last one. Bizarrely, it's entirely reasonable for it to be made up. That's sort of how the technology works. And so it's really annoying. Really annoying.
Other questions around? Thank you. Angela, and then Wilfred, and then Peter.
How are the army using it?
The sort of killer drone things. I don't know how the army's using it. I think would be the most frank answer. But I can tell you how some of it's being used in Ukraine and things. So if you try and control all these drones, we actually saw it in Iran recently. They didn't think Iran had this, but they do. So if you're flying one drone on its own at something, it's relatively easy to shoot it down. But if you manage to make a swarm of them fly really close together, like a swarm of bees, it becomes much harder to shoot them down. But actually having individual humans fly planes or drones in close formation, it turns out, is quite skilled and difficult. And if you want multiple of those happening every night, you'd need a lot of humans to do that. Whereas if you use AI to control all these differently moving things with all sorts of wind and fluctuations, yes, 3% of the time they'll deliberately fly into each other inexplicably, but the rest of the time they can be controlled very sophisticatedly to evade. And so it is changing the nature of all sorts of things, including what the military do. But I think that's different. That's a sort of logical progression, which is quite different to, the Terminator films and killer robots walking around just sort of shooting citizens and walking off again. So I think is this incremental change and technology that develops for a normal army, or have we gone into a kind of dystopian loony place where all sorts of weird things are happening? And I suspect a bit of both is happening. The military-industrial complex is an odd place, and all sorts of people try and do different things.
Wilfred, you're going to ask Daddy something.
Does AI have to tell lies or untruths, or have we just not got the technology to make it tell the truth and not just a prediction?
It doesn't understand. So the simple answer to your question is we don't have the technology yet. But even if we got the thing I was talking about as the possible future, general AI, it would be so good it would choose to lie. So it would so with today's, if you ask it 6 + 4 enough, eventually you'll get an answer that's not 10. And I've sort of picked a silly example because they probably have a guard against that, but that is the sort of thing people do. They'll keep asking it. There's a question about a strawberry or something. But these tests that it gets stuck on inexplicably, and they then fix the code to not do that, but they don't have a general solution to not lying. It's sort of part of it. It's not actually trying to lie. It just, Yeah, so you know how you're going, you don't anymore, but you've got 6 and you're adding 4, and then, you know, something interesting enters your head and you get to 11 for some reason, and then the teacher says, no, and you go, oh no, of course it's not, it's 10. But it's rather similar, it's just, it's got all those possibilities, and sometimes it just throws out the wrong one, because that's how it works.
We see photographs of these vast data centres consuming huge amounts of electricity. How vulnerable are they? And is there the sort of redundancies so that if a couple have knocked out, we'll still be able to use our Google stuff? And
yeah, so the tech bros, one of the other phrases sometimes heard is the hyperscalers. So Oracle, Google, Amazon, Microsoft. So back in the day, in the early 2000s, when the dot-com boom, you had people putting data centers up in London and all sorts of different people independently, and they still exist today like that. But when Google builds a data center, they build the entire building themselves. The computers don't have cases. They're probably just raw components lowered into oil because it helps the heat dissipate better. Like it's not a room full of computer boxes. It is, and now they build them next to a nuclear power station, so it has a power source. Or it's a really big bomb, depending on your point of view. So, yes, they are designed to be able to cope with different data centers disappearing in a way that didn't exist, even to some extent 10 years ago, but certainly 20 years ago. But they're also very obvious where they are. You can't miss a data center.
Could a drone knock one out?
Yeah, because it probably only needs to hit the most vulnerable bit, and that's a lot of what Ukraine has been doing, as I've seen it, is that, you know, they worked out on the oil refineries, actually there's certain bits that are very hard, that have an 18-month lead time to rebuild. So the key thing is to fly the drone into that, not the big pile of oil. The big pile of oil might go bang, but there's still lots more oil there. But if we attack these particular bits that are very hard to replicate, then you're stuck. And I would say the same vulnerability exists there.
Other questions? Okay, sorry. Oh, yep, Fiona.
Do you have any thoughts about how this whole thing could be regulated? You've mentioned the deep fake, which is quite fun, but of course for many people it's very bad and very distressing, and some really unwelcome things have happened. I'm a musician and my daughters are, and we're in a situation where it's just so easy to train AI on people's music, their voices, their singing, and not pay for the use of the tracks and what, you know, the data they've used. And it seems as though governments are very reluctant to actually put any regulation here. Have we gone past the stage of regulation even? Or do you need another AI program to do the regulating?
I think, yeah, what I think I agree with all the questions, which is not a helpful answer. But yes, the governments have been weak and let all sorts of stuff that had copyright just be sucked up by the AIs so they can build these models. And that's already happened now. So to some extent, how do you put the genie back in the bottle? I don't know. Does anyone think a book that's been published since 2022, whether they hand on heart, if they didn't write it, know it was generated by AI or not? It was around 2022 it sort of became so much better at writing books. So it's really difficult, and I do not know. I do not know how to, you know, because my immediate thing goes, can we spot it? And you can't spot it because humans mimic the AI. AI used to write in a certain weird, bit this public schoolboy voice. Now everyone else has started writing like that because they've received so many answers from AI, they're now writing like the AI does. And then the AI changes how it does things. So you sort of think, well, could we spot, based on the AI playing things perfectly versus a musician making the odd slip. But no, because it knows how to play things imperfectly. So it is a difficult conundrum for us to deal with, and I don't have the faintest idea other than how do we make people more discerning. Actually, I'd like to go to some live music with actual humans, not animatronic robots, because that must be real. So I think helping people understand what isn't real or might not be real is the most practical thing from my point of view at the moment.
Wendy has a question at the back here.
Thank you, Stuart. Well, it's all very interesting. Thank you. Do you think there'll be a backlash against this sometime? Because we're getting all sorts of scare stories about what AI might be able to do. I can remember one, but I can't remember the details, but that it would be possible to get an AI model that could figure out how to hack any computer that's ever been made. And if that was sold to criminals, nobody is safe anymore. And the things that we see, like in elections, where people can be apparently saying the most ridiculous things and it's all a deep fake. Do you think there'll come a time where people get so worried about this that somehow AI will be banned? And I don't know how you'd ban it, but do you think that's coming?
I think there'll be some strange knee-jerk reactions. The Dangerous Dog Act springs to mind as a slightly strange knee-jerk reaction. So government for years ignored social media, and now governments around the world are frantically banning it, which might be the right thing to do in the short term, but it's an interesting reflection on parental responsibility that everyone thought it was great to just let children on social media in the last 10 years, not everyone, but a lot of people, and then suddenly it's why is this being let upon us? So, we all have agency. Why are we tolerating all this strange stuff and way of behaving? Will AI take over the world? I doubt it. It'll probably be off having a hallucination about something. It hasn't yet. There will be all sorts of people trying to game it, use it to their advantage, but it is just another tool, so again, I come back to it's a mirror of our own behavior. So yes, there's lots of people who are not very nice, there's lots of people who are great, let's be positive. They can both use AI, and it is a tool, you invent the gun, it has downsides, but it probably has upsides as well. So, yeah, I think it has good things, but there are a lot of downsides currently.
Well, based on that, because I think this is fascinating, and I think you just, we're so balanced in what you've put in front of us, but there you put it on the screen: care, compassion, discernment. So you're really talking about morality. And that with social media, absolutely. There's a moral argument, isn't there, around social media and how we use it. And I'm interested to know whether in your world, morality and values is it any part of any conversation, and how you feel that we, who are not experts, I'm certainly not, but as somebody who is taking morality and values and our Christian faith very seriously, what are the things that you feel we could be doing to ensure that the children in the future are safe morally in this AI world, which is here to stay?
Yeah, I think people knowing things. No one in Silicon Valley, the tech bros, don't let their own children use smartphones. Now, if the whole population of Britain knew that, they might reflect on the fact smartphones are this addictive thing, deliberately designed to be addictive, and to make all sorts of chemicals light up in your brain and everything else. And they'd go, well, these are the people creating these things and attaching people to it with social media. Why aren't they letting their own children on it? So, yeah, there's definitely morality there. I think there's a lot of people trying to do good. So, yeah, in my professional spheres, it's often quite overwhelming, actually, despite all sorts of things going on and people labeling things one way or another. You see all sorts of people trying to do good every day and trying to make incremental improvement. They know they can't fix the world, but they can make this little bit better. So I think it's not being downhearted, going, okay, well, I can't magic AI to stop lying, but I can make Wilfred and Florence aware that it does say the wrong thing sometimes. I can make them aware that, yes, there's this funny thing called Facebook, and some bits of it are good, but some bits of it aren't really good. So I think the more we can all explain it as, yes, AI has fascinated, it can tell you all sorts of information about musicians, but it can also rip them off. And you have to decide which bit, is good, is moral.
We'll finish there, Stuart. But thank you so much for an eminently clear initial input and then answering those questions very honestly in an area that is anxious-making, but full of possibility as well. It's the percentage that goes wrong and who's in charge that really worries me. So I know. Sorry, I have another question, but there isn't time to ask. We'll say Compline, which just is a short service. On the table there should be a copy of the service. If you don't want to be heard, do turn yourself off or take off that as well. Take the mic out. So let's just be quiet for a moment, take in and spend a moment reflecting on all that we have heard and offering it in our own way to the God above all things and in all things. The Lord